Hi, guys. Welcome to Tech Exploited, where we will be going through different tech talks with various professionals in the tech field and uncovering what it's really like to be in tech and how to get into this industry. So, today I'll be talking with my good friend Michael King, who is a AWS technical recruiter for Amazon. And so, yeah, Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been a technical recruiter, and yeah.
Yeah, I guess specifically a technical recruiter, I started back in early 2021. So I've technically been only doing it for about um, a year or about 2 years now. I started as a recruiting coordinator, and they were basically kind of helpers to recruiters. And then I just kind of had an interest in it. I learned and kind of started sourcing candidates, aka recruiting them on the side, while also doing my scheduling tasks. And then I just built up some great relations with the recruiters that I was working with and that I was partnered up with. And
Mhm.
eventually they just invited me to join the team. And that's kind of how I got into this whole world of technical recruiting at Amazon and AWS.
Gotcha. Awesome. And so, did you do any other type of recruiting before going into technical recruiting at Amazon, or have you always only done technical recruiting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can technically say recruiting is essentially a sales job. So I had a bit of experience as a licensed sales representative at Allstate Insurance. So
Mhm.
I definitely am very familiar with cold calling and dealing with a lot of rejection. And I think that got me really like ready and set for a job such as this. Although we didn't really have to call the candidates to recruit them initially, we did have to send a lot of emails, a lot of cold emails, and then we had to essentially get really crafty about maybe the subject line or kind of the content in the email, like make sure there's no links because 99% of the time, if there's links in the email, they go to spam. So we get really crafty with that. So I'm very, I guess, used to that whole like sales role, and
Yeah.
I think that's what recruiting essentially is.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, getting right into some things that might be interesting for maybe college students or people that are interested into getting into Amazon and working for like AWS, right? I guess what are some skills that you look at that are like the most valuable when you're like going through people's profiles on LinkedIn or looking at resumes where you're like, ooh, that's good. I'm gonna send it to the hiring manager. Like, what do you technically look for?
Yeah, that's a great question. Loaded question as well because there's really a lot of things that you can look for in a resume. But for me, a lot of the things that I look for were great adjectives at the very beginning. Something
Hmm.
like they spearheaded or they kind of were a leader in. A lot of those things. That's kind of like a big like catchphrase or like a word that I'd be looking for that would catch my eye, and I'd be like, all right, so I want to see what else they have to say about that, and then in the resume if they're very specific about their accomplishments. And what I mean by specific is if they have very like hard data, percentages, numbers on things they accomplished, like they worked on a project and because they increased something within the workflow by 17%, the
Mm.
business was XYZ successful, something like that. So that's kind of what I search for initially, especially in a lot of like tech resumes. I want to see that they led projects. I want to see that they were constantly improving some sort of function to maybe like a button for a website. It could be something small, but I just want to see that they're making an effort actively to make make a program or make a software more efficient.
Okay. And so I feel like that's probably more relevant for people that have been working in the industry for a couple of years, right? Where it's like
Mhm.
they've improved something by a certain metric, or maybe like they even did that at like an internship, if you will, right?
Mhm.
But for like students who are just like right out of school, maybe like they
Yeah.
don't even have like a CS degree, but they like learn CS on the side, like on their own or something like that. Like, what would you look for or like recommend people with that type of background to do if they're interested in working for a company like Amazon?
Yeah, I guess this applies to tech people, but honestly, anyone else too. If you're trying to get into whatever profession you're trying to get into, I think you need to work on projects. And I guess specifically for tech people, if you're developing software, right, just find projects and start developing software. Just keep coding every day, and then talk about your accomplishments, and post your projects and what you've accomplished on GitHub as well. That's something a lot of recruiters, especially tech recruiters, will be looking for, to see like your accomplishments, especially if you're new. And then also, I think a lot of colleges, they want to simulate what it's like to work in a corporate setting. So if you're in school, you're working on a project, did you kind of help spearhead, some of the bigger components and aspects in that project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're able to collect some really like crucial data on like what did you do specifically to impact that project, and by like what percentage, right? And you're really specific about that. I think that's something recruiters are really like adamant about looking for. We want to see that you're not just someone that kind of coasts by and does the bare minimum. We want to see that you're excelling, and you're always trying to find something to make that project better, or like that software, whatever you're working on, a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, do recruiters like actually like when they go in to see like the GitHub project, like what are some projects that you've seen where you're like, wow, like that's really cool?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've seen, so this is personally as a gamer, and you probably know where this is going. I've seen a lot of developers create games, or better yet, there's a game I used to play called World of Warcraft. We're gonna go on a little tangent here, and it's kind of a technical game. There's a lot of like add-ons that you can download to enhance the interface of the game, so it'll make it more convenient. And there's like quality of life changes that'll make the game easier to play. So a developer, they made a really great application that made it very easy for the player to see how much damage they were outputting. And I was like, that's a really cool add-on. And he's like, I did this, and there were X amount of downloads for this project that I made, the software that I made for this game. And I'm like, oh, that's a really cool accomplishment. So I mean, that goes to show, like, even though it's just a game, and even though it's just something little that he added, so many people found value out of it. I don't know the exact number, but I know the download count was over 100K. So I know it was something around that page that I was really impressed by that, and I was like, that's a really cool GitHub project that you worked on.
Gotcha.
The project that you put on GitHub. Yeah.
And I think that you had like a personal attachment to it too, right? Since you had played that game, World of Warcraft, you're like, ooh, like I know what that game is. Like that mod's real. Is it like a mod? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's essentially just a mod. Yeah, an add-on mod. Same thing. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So like anything. So do you think that like the reason why the project was so cool is because it had so much visibility, and so that person was able to say like 100,000 people downloaded it and they're using it currently? Is that what gave it like that extra like clout, if you will, or?
Yeah, clout. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I think that shows that he made something that was impactful. So if he did that just for a video game, what do you think he could do if he's working in a corporate setting, for a big company like AWS? Right.
Sure. Okay. Gotcha. So
there's correlations. Yeah, there can be correlations, definitely. And I just thought that that's a very talented thing, and he went out of his way to make it too.
Okay. Has there ever been like a GitHub project that you've seen that maybe didn't have as many downloads? Like maybe it didn't have like 100,000 downloads, but you're like what helps make someone like stand out if they don't have a bunch of downloads? Or do you just like pass them by and be like, oh, this guy hasn't really done anything. Like a lot of people haven't really like seen it. He doesn't have a CS degree. Like, why should I pick up this guy? Like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me too, I think a lot of the GitHub projects I looked at, they were very supplementary to what I initially saw in the resume. So like, I wouldn't even check a lot of GitHub projects out unless I was like, all right, there's a lot in their resume that I'm really interested in. Let me check their GitHub to see if there's more projects that they may have not mentioned. That's really the only time I'd really look. Otherwise, I would pass by a lot of resumes because there wasn't a lot of specificity in what they did. There wasn't a lot of clarification on what did they specifically do to have an impact on whatever they're working on. They were just listing out things that they were doing on a daily basis, their daily tasks, right? And just kind of like, this is what I did. And I'm like, okay, that's not really a lot of information, and that's not really impressive. Or what we're looking for. We're looking for leaders. We want to see someone, even if they're like just a college student, right? Even if you're just kind of starting out, you don't have any professional industry experience. If you show leadership qualities in terms of like a project, like I said earlier, that you led for school, right? I think that goes a long way. And if you can really quantify that data, it's very big and something that a lot of recruiters are looking for.
Gotcha. I have two questions for you now. I feel
Oh,
like these are
great.
kind of like the controversial, like
All right.
recruiter, like resume type of thing. So I just want
Bring
to
him on.
hear your opinion on them. So the
Mm,
first one is, how do you feel about two-page resumes? And the second one is, how do you feel about the summary section? You know how people will put like, oh, like I am a really good communicative like leader, like I learn quickly, like da da, da, but they write like a 2 or 3 like sentence thing at the top of their resume. Like, do you like those? Or if you see that, you're like, nah, get that out of here. I want to see like a list of skills instead. Like, how do you feel about those two things? So, one, more than 1 page long resumes, and
okay.
two, summary sections on the resumes.
Okay. So I'll be completely transparent. I'll be completely transparent here.
Yeah.
We go and we sift through. I want to say I in my heyday when I was at my best, I would say I sifted through 300 to like 350 candidates daily.
350 candidates daily?
And the only way I would do that is if I took less than 10 seconds to glance at a resume. So I'm sure that goes to tell you a lot, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the tech industry, because I was looking for
Mhm.
more senior developers, right? People
Okay.
with 5-ish years of experience or more, right? So specifically for me, there's just so many people in the pipeline, so many people jumping from the biggest FANG companies to another
Yeah.
FANG company, or
Yeah.
it's called Mang now, whatever you want to call it now.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a lot of time because I had to go through so many.
Sure.
And it got to the point, and I don't want to devalue recruiters by any means here. It got to the point where we basically were kind of reaching out to anyone that I don't want, like, I had a heartbeat, we could say. Like, are you breathing? No, but like
You have a
essentially,
pulse. Can you code?
can you exactly? Can you code and do you have a pulse? That's what it
Yeah.
ultimately came down to, and it was very low cost for us because we just invite them to take an online assessment, and if they didn't pass the online assessment, it's no big deal to us because they take it on their own time. We just kind of schedule it for them. We send it out and they can take it whenever. But the link expires, so I always try to press my candidates to be like, "Hey, link is going to expire. Can you please take it on this date?" And give them a deadline, even though I can refresh it myself. Like I can just refresh the link. So
That's interesting. So
yeah,
let's go into that. So
we
you
can talk
could
about this. Yeah.
you could refresh the link, right? So you send them a coding like exam test preliminary, whatever you want to call it. And let's say they have like, how long do they normally have to take it after you send them that link?
Okay, so this is like kind of Amazon secrets, but not really. Like you're totally
Okay.
free to disclose this information.
Okay.
But I was told personally to tell your candidates they have a 7-day limit on the day after you send it.
So you have 1 week.
So you have 1 week to take it.
Okay.
Yeah. But because I was trying to be a personable recruiter, I wanted my candidates to put their best foot forward. 1 week may not be enough if they're completely out of touch with LeetCode, which is the style
Sure.
of coding that they're going to be doing for this online assessment. So I would tell them, hey man, I can always refresh this link, but it'll probably expire within a week. And then if you can't hit the link or for whatever reason doesn't work, then just reach out to me and I'll reset the link for you. But take your time and study. And I would kind of give them tips and prep them and make sure they're really ready to take it. And I think that's what a lot of recruiters miss because for Amazon, especially in AWS, recruiters saw it as a numbers game. We looked at the data. We looked specifically at like, all right, how many online assessments do you have to send out to get one candidate to go to an on-site interview? And then once they make it to an on-site interview, will they accept the offer?
Gotcha.
So we're looking at it through the pipeline, and then just strictly data and saying like, all right, let's just send them out, and then let's not communicate to these candidates until they either pass it and have to go to an onsite, or that's it. That's kind of the end of the line. You just won't communicate after that, and they'll get sent an email saying they got rejected automatically.
So going back to the whole like you can extend it. Like what's the longest you've ever extended it for? Like a month, 2 months? Like
I mean, honestly, there's probably still people that haven't taken it, even though I sent it back in like July, maybe even in June, and they just have it sitting in their email.
So even though it's expired and it was from like 6 months ago, because right now it's December, right? And you're saying that's about like 6 months ago. So you could still have them take it again 6 months later, even though the link expired after a week
Yes.
of use. Okay.
I can refresh the link. I can go back, just refresh the link. They'll get an email saying like, hey, you can take the online assessment again. The only issue is
Uh-huh.
if they've already taken the assessment and if they've failed, they
Mhm.
have a 6 month cooling period before they can take it again.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting. So it's like you failed the exam, but you have 6 months to kind of like freshen up on your skills, see if you could do a little bit better next time, and
exactly.
then you could send them another one 6 months later.
Mhm.
Interesting.
That could be AWS specific though, just because Amazon's so big. The
Sure.
way they do the assessments are completely different. Some may do a phone interview, right? And I know all of AWS were trying to standardize doing online assessments,
Mhm.
which has shown which has shown a bit more like accuracy rate in terms of how candidates perform during the onset interview.
Mhm. Interesting. That's fascinating.
Mhm.
Okay. And then when you would prep these candidates, right? Like how would you prep them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, this is completely up to discretion of the recruiter. So
Mm.
as a recruiter, you have complete reign over how you handle talking to candidates, how you handle, your pipeline, what you want to do, how personal you want to be, how much information you want to give them in terms of like, do you want them to text you back and stuff? Do you want to give them your personal number? So for me, and what method worked really well for me, and kind of how I think I was successful in my role is I would spend more time in prepping them and not really scaring them is probably not the best word, but like really letting them know, letting them know that this is not easy. Like if you're
Yeah.
out of touch with leak code, you're not going to do well on this test, and it's not going to be exactly like a real world simulation,
Yeah.
right? I tell them like, hey, you're going to want to hit the books again. You want to go back to some of the things you learned in college, right? Like hash maps and like I mean, there's like some other terms. It's been a while since I prepped a candidate, but essentially, yeah, those are things they learned back in college in their
Mhm.
CS classes. So I'm like, go back, brush up on some of those things, and then go and practice leak code at the leak code site. There's like easy questions, medium questions, and then there's hard questions. And
Mhm.
I always tell them if you can do the medium questions in around 30 minutes or less, you're going to be in good shape for the test.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I would, yeah, I would just study and practice and just keep doing those problems every day.
So would you say that like I've heard that a really big thing for my friends in computer science is like cracking the coding interview, like that book. So between like that book and going to the Leak Code website, you're nodding your head. So I'm assuming that's good advice. And so if you're to like solve those medium level difficulty questions and then read through that book and do those practice exercises, would you say that you're in pretty good shape to like pass like an AWS interview for whatever position you're trying to get into?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll elaborate a little bit more because it'll make more sense in terms of context. I'll elaborate on the levels for Amazon. So
Okay.
an SD1, they don't really need to know a lot about system design, and that's going to be important later because that's the role for, I guess, a more senior developer. But at Amazon, the way we say SD2
Mhm.
is like a senior developer for any other mid market company. So the
Okay.
title is different, where it doesn't seem like you're senior at Amazon, but it is actually a very senior level role. So yes, for interviewing at Amazon, if you look through Cracking the Coding interview,
Mhm.
I think that's one of the best books by Gail Lackman McDowell, I think is the author's name. I always recommend that because a lot of the interviewers at Amazon, the ones that I've talked to, ones I've worked with, they recommend that book as well.
Gotcha.
So 100% use that book and then practice leak code problems. I think that's one of the best things to do. Just go to the website and just heads down, practice them. Maybe just a few a day. You don't have to like spend hours every day. Just spend like an hour, maybe half an hour each day,
Mhm.
whatever your preference is. And then the thing about the interview is that if you're more, I guess, more junior, you have 1 or 2 years of industry experience, and you don't know system design that well, but you know coding really well. If you can get some of that experience in system design, you could probably be leveled up to an SD2, which they get a much higher pay band.
Mm.
So I know it seems like a small step, but learning system design, knowing system design, there's also a lot of resources out there on the internet in terms of like YouTube videos that I would usually recommend. I don't have those links on me, but yeah, that's really the only thing. Coding is all the same almost across the board from a junior developer to a senior
Mhm.
developer. Obviously, it's a little bit harder for senior developer, but coding in terms of like how you interview for it at Amazon, it's almost like a very similar bar.
Gotcha.
So yeah, leak code is it's important, and a lot of people um, find that to be BS, lack of a better word, because
Okay.
I just remember hearing from a lot of candidates that they'd be like, yeah, I know this is not like a real life simulation because we don't do leak code problems in work, right? We don't do these
Sure.
problems every day. Like this is not
Sure.
something that is gonna be it doesn't technically test how well I'm gonna be as a corporate worker, right?
Sure.
Or like what I'm gonna produce. So
Yeah.
that's the part that kind of sucks, but at the same time, I don't usually counter argue with this, but in my mind, I'm like, well, you should still be able to do these like basic fundamental questions,
Uh-huh.
because they're essentially puzzles that will mimic what you do in real life,
Sure.
potentially.
It's kind of like the SATs, right?
Yep,
Like for college, where it's
exactly.
like you're not going to really need to do those SAT problems again while you're in college, but you need to take the SAT exam for you to get into college. I feel like it's the same thing, but for like getting into these big, like Mang Fang companies, right? Where it's like you have to practice the leak code, just do
Yep.
it, and then prove that you have the skills, and then you get the job. That's how you get the job, right?
Yeah, it's a skill, honestly. It's an interviewing thing too. So
Mm.
again, like coding is very important, but Amazon also has the leadership principles, right?
Let's talk about that a little bit.
I was gonna
Okay,
say, yeah, it's a
so
good segue.
So Amazon's leadership principle. So let's say you are the best coder in the whole world, right?
Mhm.
But I know like that Amazon kind of has like its technical portion and then it has like its non-technical portion of its interviews. So maybe like walk us through like the interview process of Amazon, like how many phases there are, and then like how important the technical side is weighed versus like the non-technical side, like the leadership principle side of it is weighed in evaluating a candidate.
Great question. Yeah, this is probably the best question, and the one I get the most often as well from candidates.
Mhm.
Um, so I would honestly do like 70, maybe like 80, 80, 20 in terms of technical 80%, and then 20% behavioral questions.
Okay.
And that's kind of how you split up your time. Uh, and there's so much to talk about. It's kind of hard to
So
like.
that's how you split up your time. But is that also the relevance in getting you the job? So let's say you're like 80% like solid, right, on your technical part, but you're like 20% and you don't get it. Like you get 20% of the questions wrong for leak code, right? But let's say it's reversed for your leadership principles. So would you get the job? So let's say like you're really really bad at your leadership principles, but you get like one or two that are pretty like solid and you nail them down. Like would you get it or do you like how's that weighed out?
So here's the fun thing. It would really depend on which leadership principle it is,
Interesting. So they're not
because they
all weighed
will
the same.
they will compromise. They'll be like, well, they were so good at coding, but they weren't very great in terms of this behavioral like question. Are they coachable in this one? So there's a few things that you can be coachable in, and there's a few behavioral questions that we ask where if you answer in a certain way, we know you won't be coachable because that's just kind of your nature and your character.
Like what can't
Um,
you be coachable in?
there's one called Earns Trust at Amazon. That's kind of the one we take the most seriously out of all the behavioral questions in every single interview at Amazon. So Earns Trust essentially is your ability to obviously earn the trust of your teammates, earn the trust of any customers that you're working with, of the business, etc. And are you kind of a team player, right?
Mm,
So if there's any hint where you kind of make a out of line selfish decision, or you do something really reckless, right, and you're not really being thoughtful, which it blows my mind how many candidates will kind of blow it in their interview by saying something that's just way out of line or way out of hand, saying like, oh yeah, I had a really bad argument with my manager, I just didn't agree with him, and in their heads they're like, I was pushing back, I was being good because I know my way's better, but
I'm
then they don't
disagreeing
have.
and committing.
You could say that. No, you could say that. But they had no data to back it up. They just said they based it off their feelings, right? So something like that, it does not earn the trust of their manager, does not earn the trust of their team. And maybe they just went and made the changes to a certain like software, right? And then now they're like, all right, you just took that huge risk. Maybe it worked out and that's why they told the story. Maybe it worked out
Okay.
and they got praised for it. But how risky is that? Like there was no like communication, there was no like reaching out to a friend or a peer or a coworker being like, hey, what are your thoughts? Maybe I'll look something up and Google it, even like Google it and find like more data on this before I make any changes, right? We want to
Mhm.
see that you're going to make big changes. We want to see that you're going to have an impact, but like at what cost? Are you
Mhm.
like are you gonna make some drastic change without any data? Like you're just gonna
Mm.
go for it based off a feeling? That's too risky. We don't want to bring someone like that on the team.
Like, don't work in a silo. Like, we want collaboration type of deal.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
We don't want someone with a big ego essentially. Like I know it kind of sounds bad, but like that's gonna have a big impact. Like, are you a team player? Are you willing to also by disagree and commit, have backbone, disagree and commit, that leadership principle is your ability to push back and say, hey, I think this is better based on the data that I have. But the whole team wants to go a different route.
Sure.
Are you gonna agree to that? Or are you gonna be, your own on another island by yourself, trying to make your own decisions and fighting against the team?
Gotcha. So there's a fine line, right, between the
Yep.
two. It's like, are you disagreeing and committing because you already have all the data and you've done the research so that you know that this decision, even though you're disagreeing with the rest of your team, has a cause right behind it, where it's like, this is why we need to go in this direction. So that's seen as like collaboration slash communication slash disagreeing and commit. Versus the other ones, like, I just feel like this is the right decision, so we're gonna do this, and that's what you don't want to
Exactly.
see. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. You don't want to say, you don't want to go off feelings. Like when
Mhm.
when you're getting interviewed, you want to have hard data. So I think a lot of people they don't have a lot of notes in front of them, or they don't bring notes to the interview. But for the behavioral portion, and this is I guess only for the tech side, but behavioral portion, I always encourage my candidates, write down all your examples, highlight any like percentages or numbers or data, so you can just look down at your notes and just pop them out whenever you have like a moment to talk about them. And oh yeah, go ahead.
So that's interesting. I've never heard that before. To bring in notes to your interview. Like, is this only applying for virtual interviews or is this also applying for like real life interviews? Like, would you bring in like postcards or like, what's it called? Like index cards with this like information on it? Because like, this is very interesting.
So, fun fact for my interview at Amazon, I had an interview bookcase that had my resume and then my notes. And I wrote down some examples from my previous job where I had certain specific like data on like how I had an impact in a certain like project or report or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I think a lot of the interviewers at Amazon were just in general, we're very data driven. So we respect that. We think that's great, and we think that you're a prepared candidate if you bring notes.
Interesting.
So it's really important, I think, and almost imperative to your success to have those notes with you during the behavioral portion of the interview.
That's fascinating. So like you brought like
Mhm.
a pad folio or something like that with like everything.
Absolutely. It was filled
Interesting.
out. The three,
Wow.
so fun fact too, I also interviewed 3 times at Amazon.
I didn't know
And
this.
they were all passing interviews, obviously. So my first one was for my contractor interview. It
Mhm.
was each interview was 30 minutes long, and I met with 3 people, and they were all behavior questions. I went after I was employed, I went through a question bank that we have at Amazon and looked at all the questions they asked, and they were the same ones. So obviously, the Amazonians, they'll look at a question bank based on the leadership principle they have,
Mhm.
and there'll be a bunch of questions, like five to like 10 questions that are linked to that leadership principle, and they
Okay.
can choose whichever one they want to ask that they think would be a good
Yeah, yeah,
question in
yeah.
that moment, depending on what kind of the stories the candidate's telling.
Gotcha.
um yeah, and then I took another, so after being contracted for about 6 to 9 months, they have you do a full interview loop to become a full-time employee at Amazon.
Mhm.
And then I had to go through three, they were roughly 45 minutes to an hour long interview, so they're a little bit longer. Obviously they ask more questions because they expect you to have even more data,
Mhm.
right, because you're an Amazonian, right? So
Mhm.
it was surprisingly, it felt more challenging than just coming from the outside,
Mm.
to interview within, right?
Yeah.
And then I had to interview again for my sourcing position. A lot of them were theoretical questions on
Okay.
top of more behavioral questions on
Mhm.
like how would you source in this situation? How would you interact with the hiring manager in this situation, right? Because they want to
Mhm.
see that my earns trust was high,
Yeah.
that I'd be very collaborative and want to like be a team player for the most part.
Gotcha. Interesting. That's really good information and good
Hmm.
to know. Um, and so obviously you got all three positions, right? Because
Yeah.
so guys, now you know you should bring a Padfolio or write notes on your computer when you interview, and that's a really great tip. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
You can even bring on like I know a lot of people like when they're virtually interviewing,
Mhm.
to have like a second monitor with all the notes on there. I usually
Smart.
tell them to do that. And then another thing to build trust with your interviewer right on the spot, right? Just let them know like, hey, I might look off screen because I have my notes. for the
Good
behavioral
one.
portion. So I always tell my candidates like, hey, like let your interviewer know that they're gonna like that. They're gonna like the fact that you're trying to build trust with them, and that you're not like blatantly
Mm.
cheating or anything, right?
Mm. Okay. I like that. I really, really like that. I think that's a really
Overly
good.
communicate what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I love that. Okay, wait. So going back a little bit here,
Yeah.
dialing it back a little bit. So if we have this perfect candidate, flawless in all his leak code, right? Passes with
Mhm.
flying colors, but maybe he doesn't earn his interviewer's trust. Does he get the
Hmm.
position or does he not get it?
Yeah, so that's a deal breaker. And
The deal
I'd say
breaker.
I'd say 99% of the time it's up to the bar raiser, which is they're kind of an elite interviewer. So a little bit of context, a bar raiser is a non-biased interviewer outside of the team completely. So they're not a part of the team or the org, or they may be kind of similar to the org, whatever the case. But they're invited to just interview the candidate, and these interviewers are elite. Like they've done, X amount of interviews. They've done so many of them, and they're like, I don't want to say like professionally trained, but they're the ones that have the final say at the end of the interview. So if
So when you
everyone
say that they're not a part of the team, that means that they're not like a part of the team that you would be working with.
exactly.
But they're still at Amazon. They're
Oh
Amazon
yeah.
employees. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're Amazon employees. They do this in their free time because they like interviewing so much. And that's kind of
Okay.
like one of their like fun hobbies they do. It also helps to get them promoted if they're looking for an extra thing to add to
Gotcha.
their portfolio. But yeah, these interviewers, they have the final say. And they're essentially like the judge in a way, if you're thinking about it from a courtroom perspective. So like everyone is saying yes, yes, yes for this candidate. Obviously the hiring manager is like, yes, let's get this candidate in. I think they're great. But let's say they didn't do so well in like certain aspects, and the bar raiser can be like, I think because their earns trust wasn't high, or that their story that they told wasn't a big like team play story, right? They weren't really playing as a team. They were kind of doing their own thing, and it was really risky. I think because of that, we cannot bring this candidate to Amazon,
Gotcha.
and they have the final say no matter what. And I've seen these kind of conversations like happen in debriefs, what we call them, and it's very awkward because everyone's like, yes, we should go for this candidate. Everyone's really happy about it, and like it sounds like it's gonna be a hire, including the recruiter. And then the bar raiser comes in and is just like, no, absolutely not, we can't. And it just kills the mood. Everyone pushes back. There's some arguing sometimes. Well, I don't want to call it arguing, but there's like healthy conversation going on. And yeah, a lot of times, yeah, one person could just completely like flip the switch in terms of like, does the candidate get a hire or not? It doesn't even have to be a bar raiser. Sometimes it could be the interviewer too, just being like, I don't think they're good, and they'll state their reasons why, and it'll change everyone's opinion.
Okay, so the power of persuasion is strong, but with the bar raiser, would you say that that's kind of like a supreme veto type of deal, where it's
Oh,
like everyone can
they
be
have
like,
ultimate veto power. Yeah, there's no
"Hmm,
questions asked. Yeah.
interesting. Okay, and so going back to the interview process, so do you just have like a phone screen and then you have like your panel interview type of deal, or is it like what does that look like for
Yeah,
like?
so let me break down the structure. So initially, for software developers, it started off a few years back doing phone interviews. So you do one phone interview. If you pass that, you go to the final onsite, which would be typically 4 interviewers that you would meet with, and then they would just tell you if you get the job or not, accept or decline the offer. Now we're trying to standardize it, at least within AWS, where you take one online assessment,
Mm,
and there's multiple, I guess there's multiple levels of passing. And initially, like regular passing, obviously you just go straight to the final virtual on-site interview.
mhm.
um, or there's a couple, you would go to like a manual code review where someone on the inside of Amazon will review the code because maybe the candidate finished it so quickly they thought they were cheating, or the system thought they were cheating,
Ooh,
something like that, right? There's some weird like situations, or like maybe the code was like kind of strange in terms of like readability, so the system can't really understand it, and they need someone on the outside to look at it to pass the interview, pass the candidate to the next interview or not.
mhm.
Or they'd obviously just not pass. So there's all those situations. But yeah, typically online assessment, you go to the final virtual round, which is again 4 interviewers, and just to specify on what each of those 4 are, it's going to be one technical portion, as well as two behavioral portions as well.
Okay.
So sorry, 2 leadership principles, and they'll ask anywhere from 2 to 4 behavioral questions.
Wait, like
in
per
each
person?
interview. Per interview. So I'd say if it's an hour long, half of it is spent doing some sort of technical question, and the other half is spent answering anywhere from 2 to 4 behavioral questions based on leadership principles that each of the interviewers have.
So you get interviewed by each person for 1 hour long. And
Yep.
so you have 4 people, so it's a 4 hour long interview, right?
With a break in between. It's not just a
With a
straight
break in
gauntlet of
between.
death.
And so then you do an hour with each person, and then there's
Mhm.
a couple technical questions, and there's a couple of leadership principle based questions when you're interviewing with each person.
Yep, that's correct.
Gotcha. Interesting. Very, very interesting. And so for your leak code session, or those questions you have to answer,
Mhm.
the coding part, um, what language is that in? Or do you get to choose whatever language you want?
Yeah, so this is pretty fun. I think I get this question a lot, but we pretty much allow the candidate to code in whatever language they're comfortable in, and I'd say 99% of the time it's going to be either Java, Python, Ruby, C++. C Sharp's really old. Not a lot of people use C Sharp anymore, but if they want, they can. They can even do JavaScript, which is I guess it's both front end and back end. But yeah, we pretty much allow almost every language, maybe not some of the newer ones, but some of the ones that have been around for a while, both for the online assessment and for the virtual on-site interview.
Gotcha. Oh, so they
Yeah.
actually ask coding questions in the online or in the in-person interview too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They'll ask you some sort of question that's it's going to be somewhat like leak codey. I think for the most part, it's going to be like 80% leak codey, but they're going to try to like apply it to like an Amazon locker. Like, how do you make this Amazon locker system work type of deal.
Hmm.
But,
Interesting.
but yeah, I think here's the deal though. Like we say that you can pretty much code in any language, but the preference usually is there's really only two. It's either Java or Python.
Okay, that's good to know. So you guys
Yeah.
say that, but you guys really mean Java or Python.
I mean, I would say it's highly dependent on the team that you join.
Okay.
And Amazon, like 90% of Amazon uses Java. And Python's also like, up there as well. I wouldn't say it's the other 10%, but I'm just throwing numbers and words out there. Okay. I'm that guy in the interview that's just, throwing all these random facts without any basis for data.
Gotcha. Love that. Love that. Going directly against everything that you just told me. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. But Michael, I just realized you never answered my question about the summary session of resumes and the 2-page resumes.
Oh, well, I thought, okay, so going back on that, yeah, I look again, 5 seconds. That's all I need to tell if a resume is good or not. So
5 seconds, that's not a lot of time.
Summary section, get that out of my face. 2 pages, get that out of my face. Let me just look at the first, like, literally, I think it's so important, guys. Like, if you're looking at your resume, what are the first, like, 3 lines that you add in terms of, like, what you accomplished at your job? Your current workplace, what are your 3 biggest accomplishments? Put that on there. Put numbers, put data, put percentages, whatever you can. That's going to be the most important thing. That's what we're going to look at initially. And then that's what's going to catch our eye to look at maybe the rest of the resume. Otherwise, if that's not something that's on there, nothing like really pops out to me. It's next. I'm just scrolling past you instantly.
That's brutal. So you're saying that for the first job position or whatever's on there, the first 3 bullet points are the most important.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, if you can start the first word, essentially, that first word, whatever it may be, whether that's some sort of like leadership skill, like spearheaded this project, right? Something like that. If you can use a word like that, that's going to catch my eye.
Interesting. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. The recruiters don't care. You got 5 seconds, maybe 10 if you're lucky, is what you're saying.
Maybe 10, yeah.
Maybe 10.
No, I mean, there are some, again, every recruiter is different, but I think the top performing recruiters in terms of how many people they're able to bring in and bring in the top talent, they only looked at, I don't think they even looked 5 seconds. Some people were so quick. They maybe looked at the title and they looked at your experience too, in terms of like where you worked. Right. That's another thing I look at, like the dates, and then the company that you worked for. Obviously for more tenured people, but if you're more new, again, those 3 bullet points I think are going to be super important.
Gotcha. Okay. Very, very interesting. Now, another question I have for you is how do you feel about candidates applying for like a million positions at Amazon? Like you pull up their profile and you see that they applied for like 20 jobs. That reaction
Another,
just told me everything.
another great question. Another great question because I see that. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for anyone that may have been a great candidate, but I completely skip them. I don't even take a second. Yeah, I just go next
Really?
because that tells me that they're not getting interviews because they're applying to so many, right?
Mm.
Because if they're applying to so many and no one has reached back out to them, what does that tell me, right? That maybe they're not the right person for
You're
this
bottom
this
of the
job.
barrel. You look desperate.
Yeah.
You want any job, not that job, right?
It's sad because like in a way like maybe it's not desperation, maybe it's hard work, right? Just to play devil's advocate and flip it, right? They're putting all this time and effort because they want a job and maybe they do have the skills necessary. So I will say on some instances I have reached out to some of these people because I took the chance and looked at their resume and I go, okay, they actually have some relevant, right? They have some relevant information in their resume that
Uh-huh.
shows that they may be a good fit for the job. And then I've had some candidates that did get offers from that. So again, very dependent on the recruiter, but every recruiter that I've talked to, they will usually skip over these candidates. Like, they won't even take a second or even a beat to look at them if they have like over 200 applications to like different positions within Amazon, and they're not even like similar positions; they're just completely different, which also is another really big red flag.
Okay, so let's say they are similar positions, right? Like they're all similar positions. They're all for around the same level, like level 1, level 2, let's say whatever. Like whatever level's relevant to them. What is an acceptable number of positions you can apply for where you're like, okay, not a red flag, like this guy just wants a job within something that's similar role-wise?
I mean, like five. I'm gonna be really generous here. 5 to 10.
Okay, so 5 to 10 is generous. What's conservative where you're like, okay,
Conservative. I personally, in my mind, 3 to 5 applications total.
3 to 5. Okay.
Yep.
Anything
But the best
past
way,
10 is a
anything
no for you.
past 10 is kind of like, man, if you're applying to more than 10, like that doesn't look that great for you. It's not a good look overall too that you're applying to someone. If you're gonna apply to more than 10 roles within one company, why not spend that time to apply to other companies as well? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe they did apply to like 100 roles at like all the other companies too. But I think that just lessens your chances. So
They
don't
just
do
want to
that.
work at Amazon. They
Just
they
don't do.
really
I'm
want to.
sorry. Don't do that. It's not good. A lot of recruiters will completely pass you by. I'm serious. They
Okay,
will.
so like what is a respectable amount of time between the different roles that you apply for? So let's say they applied for over 10, but it's over the course of a year. Is that more respectable versus like 10 in like a month?
Oh yeah, that's fine. I think yeah, because you can see the dates as you're scrolling through how many roles they they applied for, and I see the minutes too. I'm just like 523, 524, 524, 525. I'm just like, man, this guy's just he's just powering through and not even really, I don't know, reading the job description. They're just seeing maybe they can get
Mm,
a big fish that way. They're doing a volumes game type of thing. Don't do
okay.
that. It doesn't work.
Don't spray and don't pray. Don't
Don't
spray and
spray, don't
pray.
pray. I think yeah, wait about a year. I mean, if you don't get anything back, right? Wait a year and then just work hard at your job, try to excel in it, try to find projects that are meaningful, try to find ways to be more impactful in your role,
Mm.
and be a leader in your role. That's gonna be the big hitters that we look for in resumes.
Gotcha. So should you wait like 6 months before applying again if you don't hear back? Like what? How long should you wait to hear
It's
back
respectable.
typically?
Yeah, 6 months. I'd say that's pretty respectable. Maybe
Okay.
even 3 months, honestly.
So apply again after 3 months. If you don't hear again, so if you don't hear back within 3 months, apply again after 3 months, essentially.
Yep. And then if you're a developer, here's the thing: the market's changed a bit. But let's say this is like a year or 2 years ago. If you're a developer and you have a somewhat respectable company in your name, or let's say you have some relevant projects that you've potentially led, and you kind of have that on your resume, you will most likely not have to apply because you probably have already gotten 25 Amazon emails from other recruiters. So I'm saying like it may be different now, and I know for a lot of college students that's usually not the case.
Mhm.
But if you're a college student, you can always just directly apply for Amazon student programs,
What is that?
and it's kind of like an internship where it's not an internship. It's more like you take multiple online assessments. They're a little bit different than the ones you do at the industry software developer level. So they're a little different in terms of they're a little easier. I think you can do them a little quicker. And there's like a gauntlet they have to get through. And if you pass that, you automatically get accepted into Amazon, and you just start as a like a first year developer.
Sounds like a
So
pretty sweet
it
gig.
guarantees you a role. So I think for a lot of students that have like some projects that they've led, or maybe they've like just built some software on their own, just a side project that they want to do for fun, right? And they have that on their resume. They should apply for student programs instead of like hoping to, you know, hear from a recruiter just because they don't have that experience. They're probably not going to get a lot of people reaching out to them.
Gotcha. Okay. All good things to know. Very, very good things to know. And I guess I think those are a majority of my questions for you.
Yeah,
I think we covered a lot of ground, a lot of good things, a lot of good topics.
absolutely.
From the basics to interviewing to even like student programs just now, and some really good interview tips. And
Yeah.
so maybe what we could close this out with is you can talk about, since you've been with Amazon for a little while, like some of your favorite things, because I think that Amazon has like a lot of you hear a lot of good things and a lot of bad things, right? It's very like polarizing on like both ends.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's like, why did you stay at Amazon for as long as you did? Like, what were your favorite things about Amazon?
Yeah, I guess including my contract at the time, I've stayed at Amazon for 3.8 months. Years. So 3 years, 8 months. Sorry. I made that very
Three
confusing.
3.8 month years.
3 years, 8 months. Yes,
Yeah,
3.8.
that's a pretty long time.
Yeah, that's extremely long tenure for Amazonians. I think a lot of them have like a 1.5 year turnover rate. So yeah, I'm one of the ones that stayed for quite a while, and I think I have to put a lot of credit onto the team that I was on.
Mm.
Um, because a lot of them, and I said this in my LinkedIn post too, a lot of them are like friends and family now, like people that I really trust and I really enjoy working with. And that I just, you know, I can see outside of work and talk about life with. But I think it depends on the team that you end up on. I
Mm.
know this is like, it's kind of cliche because it's a lot of corporations are like this. You might end up on a great team, you might end up on a bad team. But the fun thing about Amazon, this is a big pro for me, is if let's say you're on a team for about a month or two and you're just not jiving with anyone. Maybe your manager is really not that great. Maybe your peers are just like, I don't know, like jerks, and they're just not fun to be with. You can always apply for a transfer and find a different role or find a different
Mm.
team that you want to transfer over to. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. You just have to put in like a ticket to HR, and most people can do that pretty easily. Like there's no problem doing that.
You could do it
So I
within
feel
the
like,
first month.
yeah, I feel like people have that option. And
Mm.
that's a big sell that I used to say to candidates, and they would love that option. They're like, "Oh yeah, that's great," because they would ask me the same question you're asking me now. Like I hear a lot of interesting things about Amazon,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think you have a lot of power. You have the power to make the change that you want in your life in that role. So
Mm.
if you don't like something, you can just go to HR, or you can find a way to join a different team. You can have a coffee chat with another manager. You just have to look it up in the Amazon's directory. Like it's really easy to connect with anyone you want. And there really are like limitless potentials. Like if you're going to join Amazon, just be ready for a lot of ambiguity, and be ready to learn, because it's not easy. It's going to be really hard. And they're going to ask you to be really scrappy. Like you're
Mhm.
not going to get a lot of information, and they're going to throw you into the fire, and see, see if you come out not burned or whatever. I don't know where I'm going with that metaphor, but essentially it's not easy, right? They
Yeah.
want to see that you're going to stay afloat if they can throw you in the water and you don't drown, right?
Yeah.
That's a bit of a better metaphor. So yeah, I think that's where it's a plus in the way where you will learn a lot in even a year or two. That's why
Mm.
people move on from Amazon after a year. They learn
Mm.
so much there, and maybe it's like getting too hard to like get promoted because you have to do like even more work just to get that next level where it's honestly like you won't be getting paid that much more, but
Mm.
maybe you'll get more stocks, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, they can move from that role into any other company, and they will excel incredibly at that company.
Gotcha. Okay. You brought up LinkedIn for a second there about your like LinkedIn post. And so that kind of just triggered another thing for me where I was like,
Yeah.
I know that you source through LinkedIn sometimes. Like, how do you source candidates through LinkedIn? I've always wondered this myself. Like, I don't know how recruiters find me ever. Like
So
how does that
really
work?
cool. There's actually you can get LinkedIn Recruiter, which is a separate program from the LinkedIn website that you already have. And it's a business account. You usually have to pay for it, and it gives you a choice to like filter candidates, and you can kind of find based on people's like job titles, based on how many years they've been in the industry, based on the school they went to, the location that they're in. You can put in all these filters. You can put in specific keywords using Boolean search, and Boolean is like using and or. It's kind of like a logic thing to enhance your search and be really specific.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing so, it'll pull up a list of candidates 25 at a time where you just go page by page and go through and like put candidates into your pools, which we can just filter ourselves.
Gotcha. And this is usually pull information keyword wise from their bio. Is that more common, or is it
Bio,
from
resume, it pulls from everything on your profile.
Wow? And there's
Yeah.
something that's like, what is your favorite thing to look at? Like, do you have a favorite where you're like, I like reading bios more. I like reading. Do bios even matter? Like, I feel like a lot of people, they don't have bios on LinkedIn.
They don't. So what would show up for me is it would show me their years of experience and what companies they worked at and what their
Okay.
titles were and what they did, kind of like
Mhm.
roughly what they did at the companies. And that's all I would look at. Again, that's why I'm saying it's almost irrelevant for the resume, because I'm looking mostly at the experience and kind of what company they worked at previous. Just because I was working with more tenured software developers.
Gotcha. So, guys, bios don't matter. Bios don't matter on your LinkedIn. They don't matter on your resume. No one cares, apparently.
Unfortunately, not. It's a waste of time.
And apparently a waste of space, too.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think LinkedIn Recruiter doesn't even show that. It only shows because like it's giving us the view of not your profile, but it literally just tells us your name, your title, maybe what school you went to, currently what location you're in, and then all your experiences that
Interesting.
you have listed on there and your accomplishments. So again, you can put those accomplishments in there, I think, and that's what's going to show up. So just be really specific. Put your top 3 again at the very top
Mhm.
of your biggest accomplishments, because that's what we look at, and that's the initial thing we see.
Gotcha. Well, that's great insight. Really good to know. And yeah, I think that kind of wraps up all the questions that I had for you, Michael. Thank you so much for your time today and enlightening me on Amazon's recruitment process. I feel like I just like learned so much.
It's
Now, if I
great.
want to become a CS developer, I know that what I need to do.
Yeah, you do. It's a lot of leak code. That's all I can tell you. Solving those puzzles.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Michael. You are the best. If people, I don't know if we want to like plug you a little bit here, but Michael actually streams on Twitch. And what is your username on Twitch, and when do you stream?
Yeah, so it's twitch.tv/Kang725. And I'm currently in the process of completely revamping my schedule. So you can probably find my schedule on my Twitch page. But yeah, I stream on Twitch, and I'll probably have a portfolio for other things eventually as well. I also have an Instagram where, if we're doing plugs now, I have an Instagram where I post food videos, where I do like little mukbangs. And my Instagram is Kang Likes Life.
Love that. And can people reach out to you if they have questions? Will you respond to them?
Absolutely, you can reach out to me, on Instagram, on Twitch if
Give
you want
him
to join my
money.
stream.
Give him money on Twitch, and maybe
Subscribe,
he'll
whatever.
like, comment,
Whatever you
subscribe
want.
to Michael.
Yeah.
And he'll be able to answer all your other Amazon questions if we didn't cover them here already. So thank you so much, Michael. And thank you for your time. Appreciate you. And have a great rest of your night.